As a kid, God, I loved SeaWorld, and I would beg my parents every summer to take me. As soon as that commercial would come on, I knew I had to go because I wanted to see the orcas. And my love for orcas didn't start with SeaWorld, and actually started with a little film called Free Willy. But things change, and you realize your childhood place that you adored isn't quite what it seems to be. So we decided to go back to SeaWorld, back to the nostalgic place that I remembered was magical as a kid. And you're probably thinking, that makes absolutely no sense. But hear me out. Okay, so I want to start off the video by saying that I don't really necessarily like SeaWorld or agree with it. But I want to give you guys some background. As a kid, when I didn't know any better, I absolutely adored SeaWorld. My entire family did. We would go often. And the older that I got, the smarter and more educated that I got, I realized that it's actually a pretty cruel place. So I love orcas. I know everything about orcas. All my teachers throughout elementary school, middle school, even high school and college will tell you that I was sort of obsessed with orcas, killer whales. For a long time, I thought I was going to be a marine biologist and study orcas in the wild. Actually, ironically, as a kid, I thought I was going to be a SeaWorld trainer. And then as I got older, I realized, no, I wanted to be a marine biologist. And then I ended up being an engineer. So, it's funny how life works out. But I wanted to kind of stress that I don't agree with the practices, right? Here's the thing, though. I've come to the realization that those animals that are currently at SeaWorld, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And they heavily, heavily rely on their trainers and being in captivity in order to eat and function and live. And if SeaWorld were to go out of business tomorrow, or their funding gets cut, those animals are going to die or get transported somewhere else, probably with a smaller tank, and sold to liquidate, right? That's usually what stores do, theme parks do. When they go out of business, declare bankruptcy, things like that, they liquidate. And the whales are assets. All the animals are assets. So in a way, if we do stop supporting SeaWorld, it's also very, very bad. Now, here's my position. I feel like SeaWorld should retire the animals that they currently have and more of like an aquarium. Keep the rides, keep the attractions that are associated with rides and the playpens for kids and all that stuff, but change the animal stations and the animal pens. But there's no question that the animals rely on their human trainers to survive. My favorite attraction, hands down, at SeaWorld is not the shows. I actually really love just going up to the orca viewing window, which is underground for the Dine with the Orcas, event. And I just like watching them swimming around. That's as close as I'm going to get to the whale. The attraction for me, like for everyone else, is to see them up close and personal. But when you get there and you see them, you realize how depressed they really are. You have this incredibly intelligent animal, and it's not just the orcas, right? It's the dolphins, it's the sea lions, it's, all the animals, and they're literally in a pool. So it's equivalent to taking a human being and shoving them in a small closet and expecting them to be happy. That's how I view it. So it is very cruel. And finally, SeaWorld should never be allowed to breed animals and place them in captivity or, of course, capture new animals. And the animals really should be allowed to just live out the rest of their life in peace. So if SeaWorld can transition into more of a rescue center aquarium with some viewing in natural waters for people to get up and close to the animals if the animals choose to while the animals retire, I'm all for that. So why did we go to SeaWorld, you're probably asking? For the same reasons that my parents took me when I was a kid. And knowing that the animals aren't going away anytime soon, and knowing that the animals rely on our funding, I took my kids so they can experience them up close and personal. For the same reasons that my parents took me when I was a kid, I was super excited about it. But the difference is I explained to my kids what was really going on and how intelligent these animals were. And my kids are very smart. My daughter understood right away. She was in awe of the orcas, for example, but she understood that it was very sad and that they should be home with the rest of their family. So it was an educational experience, and we vlogged it. I was honestly very torn. It was nostalgic, and in a way I came full circle in two aspects: understanding and realizing as a small child that my favorite attraction was cruel, but also bringing my kids to that nostalgia, that area that I love so much, but educating them very early on that things aren't what they necessarily seem to be or are advertised and marketed to be. So reviewing SeaWorld in 2024 today and comparing it to when I was a kid in the early mid-90s, the park has changed. And it's evident that they're not making the same amount of money that they used to, and they've cut corners, cut cost. What I can tell you is, at least what I could see as a customer, it doesn't seem like the quality of life for the animals has been cut. And I don't think they're going to mistreat the animals in any way. They're under a microscope, right? So the animals are going to get the best care, and I think that's where all the resources are going to right now. But the park itself is just terrible. And I'm not talking about the shows, right? Yes, the shows have changed. Obviously, the trainers can't get in the water with the animals anymore. And overall, the shows have been shortened. I remember the shows being something like 30 to 40, maybe 45 minutes long. And now they're about 15 to 20 minutes. And that's good. I'm in favor for that because, you know, it's less taxing on the animals. So in that aspect, you're going to notice that the shows have changed. They're not as spectacular as they used to be. The animals aren't being asked to do crazy amounts of tricks that are unnatural to them. And it's much more interactive with the viewers or the audience to teach certain things about the animals. But I can also tell you that some of this information that they're giving you about the animals is not entirely correct. It's not necessarily a lie or wrong, but it is supporting what they're doing or excusing it in a different way. So it's important to remember that none of the orcas are there for rehabilitation, right? You would never capture a wild orca and put it in a tank and make it feel better until it was time to release it. It just doesn't work that way. They're a very social animal that relies on their family, their pods, and being social. And they're highly intelligent. That wouldn't work, right? Maybe some of the sea lions, possibly the dolphins are there, but at the end of the day, you are enslaving an animal and making it do tricks, right? So it's not what it used to be back in the 90s, but let me take a step back. SeaWorld was known for being an extremely clean park with great food and gave you this overall great experience. So in other words, SeaWorld was known for their hospitality. That is not the case anymore. I can tell you that the food sucks, number one. Severely overpriced food for like cafeteria quality, which wasn't the case back in the day. Number two, the park itself is pretty dirty now. And number three, which is understandable, most of the workers are rude and you can tell they just don't want to be there. I get it, right? For all the bad press that SeaWorld's getting, I'm sure they don't want to be there anymore. But SeaWorld as a whole, like for example, all the bathrooms were filthy, not clean, none of that. The food was disgusting. None of the food was edible and it was extremely expensive, right? Like you could buy like a little plate for $22 and it was literally like frozen cafeteria food, disgusting. Overall, our experience at SeaWorld, I would say, was okay. We were mainly there to support the animals. So is it worth coming back? Unlikely anytime soon, and if we do, it's going to be for the very same reasons, but for my son to experience them because he'll be a little bit older. Although this is a very nostalgic and kind of sad place, it's still majestic because of these animals. I would be lying to you if I didn't admit that my inner child and all those memories that I had with my parents don't instantly come back to me as soon as I enter this park. Overall, my kids enjoyed the trip. It was a hot day, but they definitely had smiles on their faces. And if I'm being quite honest, I think my kids mainly loved seeing the orcas up close and playing in SeaWorld's playground. But I think now that my kids have experienced orcas and these majestic animals in captivity, the next natural step is to have them experience them in the wild. So we're definitely going to be booking a whale watching trip where they can see how an orca is supposed to actually live. Let me know your thoughts below. What do you think about SeaWorld? And suggest some practical solutions to how these animals should actually live out the remainder of their lives.